The fluorescent lights of the Pineview Motel's reception area buzzed with a persistent, maddening hum that seemed to penetrate my skull. Outside, an endless expanse of darkness swallowed the empty highway, broken only by the occasional sweep of headlights that never seemed to stop. I'd been working these overnight shifts for 3 months now, just long enough to pay this semester's tuition. But tonight felt different. The air hung heavy, as if the building itself was holding its breath. My textbook lay open on the counter, the words blurring together as I struggled to stay awake. Economics could wait. Survival meant keeping my scholarship, and keeping my scholarship meant enduring these mind-numbing shifts at a roadside motel where most nights passed without a single guest checking in. The door chimed at 11:42 p.m. 2 figures entered, silhouetted against the parking lot's dim lighting. A man and a woman, both dressed in dark clothes that seemed to absorb what little light existed in the lobby. My skin prickled as they approached. No luggage, not even overnight bags, just empty hands and fixed smiles that never quite reached their eyes. They wanted 4 rooms, not connecting, but spread out across the property. The man spoke in clipped sentences while the woman's eyes drifted around the reception area, lingering on the security camera in the corner, the one I knew hadn't worked in years. When I asked about their stay duration, the man simply slid his credit card across the counter and said they'd let me know. I processed their payment, my fingers suddenly clumsy against the keyboard. Something about their stillness unnerved me. People fidget, shift their weight, check their phones. These 2 just watched. As I handed over their room keys, the woman leaned slightly forward. She smelled like nothing at all, an absence where a human scent should be. After they left, my throat felt dry. I pulled up the security monitors, a precaution the owner had insisted on, despite the property's remoteness. Most cameras showed static, but the one overlooking the parking lot still functioned. I watched as the pair split up, each taking 2 room keys and heading in opposite directions without exchanging a single word. By midnight, I noticed movement on the monitor. The man was walking slowly through the parking lot, pausing occasionally to look up at the motel's windows. Not just any windows, the ones facing the reception area. My windows. I turned down the desk lamp, creating deeper shadows where I sat. The hum of the fluorescents seemed louder now, almost drowning out my quickening heartbeat. At 1:37 a.m., the woman joined him. They stood in the center of the parking lot, heads bent close together, occasionally glancing toward the reception area. Their whispers seemed to carry on the still night air, though I couldn't make out the words. Just rhythmic, hissing syllables that didn't sound quite like English. I found myself straining to hear, leaning closer to the monitor as if proximity could clarify what they were saying. By 2 a.m., they had disappeared back to their rooms. The parking lot remained empty except for their unmarked black sedan and my beat-up Honda. The relief that washed over me was short-lived. Every few minutes, I caught glimpses of curtains moving in the rooms they'd taken, rooms 108, 112, 217, and 225, never simultaneously, as if they were systematically rotating through each space, performing some ritual I couldn't comprehend. My mouth felt as if I'd been chewing cotton. The water from the cooler tasted metallic and wrong. The textbook lay forgotten as I cycled through the security feeds, watching shadows move where they shouldn't. The temperature in the reception area seemed to drop with each passing hour, my breath occasionally visible despite the thermostat reading 72 degrees. The phone rang at exactly 3 a.m. The shrill sound cut through the silence like a scalpel, sending jolts of electricity down my spine. I stared at it for 3 rings before my trembling hand reached out. The voice on the other end barely qualified as a whisper, more like the sound of dry leaves skittering across pavement. Room 217 needed assistance. Something was wrong with the bathroom. The water was running black. I needed to come see. I needed to come alone. I explained our maintenance protocol. I could call someone, but at this hour, they wouldn't arrive until morning. The whispering grew more insistent, a desperate edge creeping in that made the hairs on my arms stand rigid. They knew I was alone. They knew the owner lived 30 minutes away. They knew there were no other guests. As the voice grew more demanding, my stomach twisted into tighter knots. When I suggested they might prefer to switch rooms, the line went silent for 10 long seconds. Then the whisper returned, somehow both farther away and pressing directly against my ear. "We don't want another room. We want you to see what we've prepared." My hand was slick with sweat as I hung up. On the security monitor, I could see room 217's door slowly opening, a slice of darkness appearing between door and frame. No one emerged. The door simply remained ajar, an invitation. The monitor displaying the parking lot showed something else entirely. Both visitors standing perfectly still, faces tilted up toward the reception area windows. Yet I had just spoken to one of them on the phone from room 217. My pulse hammered against my temples as my reality fractured. I reached for my cell phone to call the owner, my fingers leaving damp prints on the screen. No service. I tried the desk phone again, dead tone. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. In that momentary darkness, I could have sworn figures appeared pressed against the reception windows. More than 2. Many more. When I looked back at the security monitor, the parking lot was empty. All 4 room doors now stood open, rectangles of perfect darkness waiting expectantly. And on every feed, in the corner of every frame, a distorted face seemed to be staring directly into the camera. Pale, elongated features, twisted in silent anticipation. I locked the reception door and retreated to the back office, barricading myself inside until dawn. The phone rang intermittently throughout the night, but I never answered. The lights continued to flicker, each blackout lasting seconds longer than the previous. When morning finally arrived, the motel stood silent. The 4 rooms were immaculate, beds untouched. The black sedan was gone. The manager found me still locked in the office, trying to explain why I hadn't responded to any of her texts. According to the system, no guests had checked in overnight. Only the security footage showed the truth, and not the visitors I expected to see. Instead, the tapes showed me walking through the parking lot at midnight, peering into my own reception window. Me, standing motionless for hours. Me, opening doors to 4 empty rooms. I quit that day. But sometimes, when I'm alone in my apartment, the phone rings at exactly 3 a.m. I never answer, but the caller always leaves the same message, a whisper saying they're still waiting for me to check the rooms, and they have all night. The fluorescent lights in Pinewood Community Hospital never fully illuminate the corridors after midnight. They flicker and hum, creating pockets of shadow that seem to breathe. I've worked the graveyard shift as a night orderly for 3 years now, and I've learned that darkness has texture in this place. It gathers in corners, pools under gurneys, and sometimes it follows you. Tonight marks my 5th consecutive night shift this week. The small rural hospital where I work typically houses no more than 20 patients, most of them elderly locals with chronic conditions. Usually my nights consist of quiet rounds, occasional bed changes, and long stretches of silence, interrupted only by the mechanical beeping of monitors and the soft moaning of restless patients. But for the past week, something has changed. I first noticed him 3 nights ago, a tall, gaunt man wearing a dark overcoat despite the summer heat. He appeared at the end of the east corridor, just beyond the nurse's station, his face partially obscured by shadow. When I approached to ask if he needed assistance, he turned and walked away, his footsteps making no sound against the linoleum floor. The second night, I spotted him again, this time near the storage closets. He seemed to be examining the emergency exit signs with unusual intensity. When night nurse Marlene rounded the corner with her medication cart, he slipped away before she could see him. When I mentioned the strange visitor to her, she looked at me with concern, noting that visiting hours had ended hours ago and the main entrance was locked. Last night, he was bolder. I caught glimpses of him 4 separate times, always at the periphery of my vision, always vanishing when other staff approached. I began to notice things about him, how he never seemed to blink, how his skin had a waxy pallor under the harsh lighting, how he seemed to survey the layout of our hospital with calculating precision. My heart pounds in my chest as I report for tonight's shift. My palms are already slick with sweat as I change into my scrubs. The air in the hospital feels different, heavier, charged with an electric anticipation that raises the hair on my forearms. The head nurse informs me that we're unusually short-staffed. Dr. Kim called in sick, and the security guard is on a break until 3 a.m. It's just Marlene, elderly janitor Frank, and me for the next several hours. The first 2 hours pass with agonizing slowness. I feel eyes on my back wherever I go. The squeak of my shoes against the floor seems unnaturally loud. Twice, I think I see the man's reflection in darkened windows. But when I turn, there's nothing. A little after 2 a.m., I find myself staring down the long corridor of the West Wing. Most of this section is undergoing renovation and has been closed to patients for months. The construction crew leaves behind tarps and equipment, creating misshapen forms in the dimness. As I turn to head back to my station, I hear it, a faint, plaintive call. "Excuse me, can you help me? I'm trying to find my uncle." He stands at the far end of the corridor, partially illuminated by the green glow of an exit sign. Up close, I can see the unnatural pallor of his skin, the too perfect symmetry of his face. My throat constricts as I manage to ask which patient he's looking for. His explanation involves a complex story about an elderly relative admitted earlier that day. But we had no new admissions, and his details are vague, contradictory. Something primal within me recognizes the falseness in his voice, the practiced quality of his concern. My tongue feels thick and dry as I tell him I need to check the records at the main desk. He blocks my retreat with surprising speed, insisting we check the rooms in the abandoned wing first. His hand touches my arm, cold, dry, with too much pressure. My heart hammers against my ribs as I reluctantly follow him into the darkened section, my mind racing through escape scenarios. The renovated wing is a maze of plastic sheeting and scaffolding. The emergency lighting casts everything in a sickly green glow. My breath comes in shallow gasps as I realize we're now far from the occupied sections of the hospital. He stops suddenly, turning to face me with an expression that no longer attempts humanity. His smile stretches too wide, revealing teeth that seem too numerous, too sharp. My legs shake as I take an instinctive step backward. That's when I notice them. 2 more figures emerging from behind sheets of plastic. effectively cutting off my path back to safety. Unlike the man, they make no attempt to appear normal. Their movements are jerky, puppet-like, their faces obscured by shadow yet somehow wrong in proportion. A cold certainty washes over me. Whatever stands before me isn't human, has never been human. The realization sends waves of nausea through my body. My perception begins to fracture as the main figure steps closer, his form seeming to shift and distort in the dim light. In my panic, I stumble backward into a stack of construction materials. The crash echoes through the abandoned wing. The three figures pause, heads tilting in perfect unison at the noise. And then, miraculously, I hear Frank's voice calling my name, the beam of his flashlight visible through the plastic sheeting. The figures retreat into the shadows with impossible speed. By the time Frank reaches me, I'm alone, shaking uncontrollably, unable to articulate what I've just witnessed. I finished that night's shift in a daze, jumping at every sound, questioning my sanity. I've researched the hospital's history since then, finding disturbing patterns of patients who checked in but never checked out, of staff who quit without notice after night shifts. I still work at Pinewood. I've requested day shifts only, but sometimes I'm required to stay late. In those moments when dusk settles over the hospital, I feel them watching, waiting for another opportunity, another night when the staffing is thin and the shadows are deep. And sometimes, from the corner of my eye, I see new employees being approached by a tall, gaunt man who needs help finding his relative in a wing that no one ever visits after dark. Fluorescent lights never tell the truth. They cast everything in a sickly pallor that makes even familiar objects seem alien. I've worked the graveyard shift at Quick Stop for 3 years now, and you'd think I'd be used to it. The buzzing overhead, the constant hum of refrigeration units, the way shadows seem to pool in corners the light can't quite reach. But tonight feels different. Tonight the shadows seem deeper, the air heavier, pressing down on my skin like a cold, damp cloth. 3:17 a.m. Downtown is dead at this hour. The occasional car passes by, headlights sweeping across the storefront windows, briefly illuminating the empty aisles before plunging them back into dim fluorescence. I'm restocking cigarettes behind the counter when the electronic chime signals someone entering. The sound makes me flinch. A man in an expensive charcoal suit walks in, his polished shoes clicking sharply against the linoleum. Everything about him seems out of place. His perfectly combed hair, the gold watch glinting at his wrist, the way his eyes never quite focus on anything in particular. My throat tightens as he approaches the counter. He asks for imported cigars, premium vodka, specialty chocolates, items we've never carried. With each query, he leans slightly closer, his cologne carrying notes of something metallic underneath the sandalwood. I explain what we don't have, pointing to what we do. He doesn't seem to listen, his gaze drifting over my shoulder. That's when I notice the second customer. I hadn't heard the door chime again. A hooded figure stands at the far end of the store, motionless in the snack aisle. The oversized clothing obscures their build, the hood pulled low over their face. They're just standing there, not browsing, not moving, watching. My skin prickles, tiny needles of apprehension dancing up my spine. The suited man asks about the security cameras, his tone casual, but his eyes suddenly sharp. I lie, saying they all work fine, even though the one in the back has been broken for months. My mouth goes dry when his lips curl into something between a smirk and a grimace. I need to restock the cooler. That's what I tell him as I step out from behind the counter, my legs feeling disconnected from my body. The stockroom door squeaks as I push it open, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet store. Through the small window in the door, I watch as the suited man makes his way toward the hooded figure. They think I can't see them, but I can. They're huddled together now, heads bent close, whispering. The suited man gestures toward the counter, toward the door, toward me. The hooded figure nods repeatedly, their shoulders shaking slightly, laughing. The fluorescent light above them flickers once, twice, plunging them momentarily into darkness before stuttering back to life. My heart hammers against my ribs as I gather sodas in trembling hands. I drop one, the can hitting the floor with a hollow clang that echoes through the stockroom. I freeze, listening. The whispering has stopped. When I return, they're standing on opposite sides of the store again, as if they'd never moved. But something's changed. The air feels electrified, charged with anticipation. I slide the drinks into the cooler, painfully aware of how exposed my back is. The suited man appears beside me suddenly, asking if I've checked the parking lot recently. There's something strange out there, he says. Something I should see. Right now. His voice is gentle, solicitous, but his eyes are cold and empty as a winter sky. I tell him I can't leave the register unattended. My voice sounds distant, like it belongs to someone else. That's when the hooded figure approaches from the other side, boxing me in beside the cooler. They suggest I take just a quick look outside. It would only take a minute. Their voice is raspy, eager. Neither of them has picked up a single item to purchase. The realization hits me like ice water in my veins. The overhead lights flicker again, longer this time. In that moment of darkness, I swear both their faces change. Features shifting, stretching into something not quite human. When the light returns, they're normal again, but their eyes reflect the fluorescence with an unnatural gleam. I feel a crawling sensation across my skin, like invisible insects skittering over every inch of exposed flesh. The suited man places his hand on my shoulder, his fingers digging in with surprising strength. He tells me again about something strange in the parking lot, something just for me. The pressure builds in my head as they close in, their whispers becoming a sinuous hiss that seems to bypass my ears and slither directly into my brain. The store's dimensions begin to warp, aisles stretching impossibly long, the ceiling rising until the fluorescent lights look like distant stars. I'm saved by the electronic chime. A group of late-night factory workers enters, loud and oblivious. The suited man and hooded figure exchange a glance, their disappointment almost palpable. They melt away to different corners of the store. By the time the workers leave with their energy drinks and snacks, my strange customers have vanished. No bell chime, no opening door. They're simply gone. All that remains is a business card on the counter, black with silver lettering. It bears a single phrase: rain check. I've quit the night shift. No job is worth what I saw in their eyes when the lights flickered. Sometimes I still wake up at 3:17 a.m., heart racing, convinced I can hear whispers outside my window, inviting me to see something strange. Something just for me. And sometimes, just for a moment before I fully wake, I find myself wanting to look